Today we're going to do the Elegant East. I'm John Rodgers, and this is based on a Stan Hewitt tour organized and carried through and led by Neil Cheemer. The Elegant East, maybe we should also put a dash US on that, because I am talking about in the United States. And the first place we're going to is Longwood Gardens. We're over in the Philadelphia area, but Longwood Gardens is down in southeast Pennsylvania on the old Route 1 at right by Kennett Square. And we're in one of the conservatories here. And in the 1700s, property, this same property was sold to a Quaker family, the Pierce, by William Penn. Samuel and Josiah Pierce collected and planted trees. This particular picture that I have on now, this yellow flower, this is Pacastachi, and it is from Peru, and I do not know whether I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I wanted to tell you since I had to look it up myself. And these are some of the beautiful outside fountains. Incidentally, these fountains, there are 380 fountain heads and spouts in the display that you see here off and on during the day while you're at these Longwood Gardens. Pierre DuPont bought the property in 1906 because trees were to be cut and he wanted to save them. This was the man who was chairman of both DuPont and General Motors. What you're looking at is a pitcher plant. This is considered one of the carnivorous plants. Insects drop into water that it has down in its throat, so to speak, and then it later, and they die, and it later digests them. We're inside the conservatory. They even grow grass, sod inside the conservatory. But we are going outside to some lily pads areas. These are quite large pads here. You can see quite a few of them too, and you will see quite a few water lilies blooming. Longwood Gardens became a country estate garden of the 1920s. Mr. DuPont, who was the owner and also the architect of the garden, died in 1954, and he left the gardens for public purposes. The funding is from his endowment, admissions, and garden shop sales. They use 400 employees, and then students and volunteers, including a total of 54 gardeners. Little maze there. And then the fountains again. These conservatories that you've been in and out of go back to 1921. And you'll see in a moment the Pierce DuPont house, and that goes back to 1730. We'll see it in a moment. These are not with that big garden display. These are separate in another part of the gardens. And here is the Pierce DuPont house. This is the one going back to 1730. And then one last picture, Mandevilla Vine, one of my favorites, as we move now to Winterthur. Now we're still in the Philadelphia area, if you will, but we're down into the northern part of Delaware. It's in the Brandywine Valley. 985 acres of hills, streams, meadows, and forests. This is the house, and it's huge. It has a magnolia collection. It has many azaleas, and this part visited is out by the azaleas and magnolias. That is all visited by a tram that you just sit on, and they pull it along. The gardens are considered 20th century American naturalism. and we'll be out there and see a little bit of it, but we're still at the house right at the moment, moving away from it now a little bit. The tram actually brings you along this road right in there. And there's a whole museum in this place. It's a decorative art collection of the period 1640 to 1860. Very hard to photograph, very dark in there. Henry Francis DuPont was born at Winterthur in 1880, and it was he who created that museum and developed the grounds. Was working farm for about 150 years. We are now out on the tram going around a little bit. The founder of the DuPont Company bought 450 acres between 1810 and 1818. His daughter and husband named their 1839 home after his birthplace in Switzerland. So this word Winterthur is actually from Switzerland. Time passed, and Colonel Henry Algernon DuPont bequeathed the place to Henry Francis in 1926. And in 1929, a large addition, you saw how big the house was, a large addition was made then. And in 1951, his Country Place Museum was opened. And Henry DuPont died in 1969 at the age of 88 years. Those are geese over there. A lot of blooming stuff all around. We were not there during the blooming of the azaleas. That would be really nice. And here's the last picture of the house as we make our way into Philadelphia proper. And in Philadelphia proper, we will be for a time, mostly really at the Independence National Historic Park. Independence Hall, which you're looking at now, is considered a World Heritage Site. It's the site of the creation of the Declaration of Independence, although the writing of it was done at a different place. But the arguments and all and the signing took place right here, and also the Constitution of the United States. So this is the outside of Independence Hall, and here is the inside. This is where the Jefferson's draft of the Declaration of Independence was argued and all before they reached agreement and the signing took place. And right in a pavilion, right in front of the Independence Hall, but back from it quite a ways, is the Liberty Bell. And I photographed it there so that you could see the crack in it. And this is a famous old building too. This is the Second Bank of the United States. We're still within the Independence National Historic Park. All of these things I've been telling you so far are in there, including Franklin Court here. Ben Franklin used to go through that opening each day because his house was back in there. The white scaffolding-like stuff that you see is the location and more or less the shape of Benjamin Franklin's house when he lived there at what is now Franklin Court. There's an old Quaker meeting house there. This old Quaker meeting house goes back to 1783. And then Christ Church. I didn't get into the church itself, but this is the tower of it, 1717 to 1754. And this is where George Washington worshiped when he was in Philadelphia, and a number of the other people that were part of the Declaration and later the Constitution. Now, we went to a place called City Tavern and we ate there, but I have no pictures of that, and so I just mention it. And I want to take you now from Christ Church over The cemetery of Christ Church is several blocks away from the church itself. But the reason for taking you over here is to show you the cemetery itself, and then this is where Benjamin Franklin is buried in Christ Church Cemetery. Now, from an earlier trip, I wanted you to see Carpenter's Hall, because the very first meeting of the Continental Congress was held in Carpenter's Hall, not in Independence Hall. And then I mentioned that the Declaration of Independence was not written in the hall. It was actually written by Thomas Jefferson at the Graft House. They have a reconstruction of the Graft House right where it was, exactly, as far as I know, exactly like it was when Jefferson wrote the Declaration. And now we move outside of the National Historic Park area, and this is the Betsy Ross house here. And over not too far from that is Elfreth Alley. It's an interesting little alley. You can walk all the way down it, and we did, and it's occupied since 1713. This little area, even though it's not in that historic park, is considered a National Historic Landmark. And then this statue is called the Signer. I assume, although I've never heard, that that means a signer of the Declaration of Independence. And right on one of the buildings, right on the sidewalk, right in the place where we stayed, is this plaque reminding everybody that it was Benjamin Franklin who started the University of Pennsylvania. And now we were on a bus tour, and it was very difficult to take photographs. I took one here of the Art Museum, but you will see some reflections in it, for which I apologize, but it's nothing I could do on it. And then I liked the statue that was on the circle right in front. And luckily I got that on the other side of the bus without any reflections in it. And we're going to leave Philadelphia proper with one last shot of the very top of Independence Hall. But we're going to be very close by, because I'm going to take you out to Cleveland. Cleveland is at Germantown, and that's the name of this house. Benjamin Chew was appointed by King George III to be the Chief Justice of the colony of Pennsylvania. And Cleveland was a summer house for Mr. Chew and his family. One folder says it was built in 1763, and another one from the exact same place said it was built in 1767. Now, Mr. Chew was also a lawyer and a political leader in Philadelphia. The blocks that make it so strong were of mica shish. Now, what I wanted to show you was a painting of the Battle of Germantown just swarming around this house. Washington felt that he had to take this house back from the British in order to win the Battle of Germantown. Actually, he should have done more, probably looking back, he should have done more of a frontal attack on the British and let this house go. But he was defeated. The battle was lost. British soldiers had occupied the house on October the 4th, 1777, during the Battle of Germantown. And then Washington's forces couldn't take it, and the British occupied Philadelphia during the winter of 1777 and 1778. Now, going back to the house, these places that you see on the steps going in, those were caused by cannonballs landing there, all the way back in the American Revolution. Now, you're not allowed to take pictures in here, so I use postcards, brochures, and things of that nature in order to show you just a little bit of the inside. I think this is the only picture I show you inside of Cleveland. This is a Gordonia bloom. I'm a horticulturist, and I very rarely get to see that plant bloom. So I was interested in getting what I consider a pretty good picture of it. And that's our group. We're just about finished the tour and are ready to get on our bus because we're going to head on up to Newport, Rhode Island. And I took this picture as we were crossing the Hudson River on the George Washington Bridge. I do other shows, some connected with Stan Hewitt tours, one of them in particular called High Points Along the Hudson, where I cover this whole area in a great bit more detail than that. Now we're up in Rhode Island now, and we're going to come across this bridge right over to the Newport area right here. Let's see, I'll show you just a little bit more. There's the bridge there, and we will be down in this area. The cottages are along here. That's a term I'll kid about in a little bit. And then Hammersmith Farm is right in here, and that's the first one that we will actually see. Now, this is the Viking Hotel. This is a hotel where we stayed. This goes back quite a while, but I don't have a date of it. But here is a postcard, and the Viking Hotel is shown right here. And you can see we're not very far from the harbor, and this is a finger of Narragansett Bay that goes on up towards Providence. I'll show you pictures of this church here and just a little bit along the waterfront. The waterfront has gone sort of touristy, so it's not a real fishing, this part of it is not a real fishing place. And that church is Trinity Church, and I guess I'm going to show you that first. It's a nice church. You know, we walked through the yard of it as we were making our way down to the waterfront, and see what I mean. It's sort of touristy. And this is a statue down from the hotel of Oliver Hazard Perry of Lake Erie fame. That's in the War of 1812. And he was in the Newport area for a time. And then there's a statue of Columbus down there also on one of the streets. And that's sort of appropriate because, for your information, we are taping this on Columbus's the discovery date, at least the way the holiday is handled these days. Actually, it's October the 11th, not the 12th, but that's a statue of Mr. Columbus. And then in front of the Redwood Library is a statue of George Washington. There's an art museum there that rings a nice bell with me because I like Tudor stuff. I like the beams and the stucco and stuff. And then if you're a tennis fan, we looked out on this area when we were eating lunch one of the days we were in Newport. And this is the Tennis Hall of Fame grounds that we're looking at here. There's this old stone mill. This is right by the statue of Oliver Hazard Perry. And they have not decided whether this goes back to the 17th century or indeed goes back as far as the Vikings. I don't have a figure on it. So that's what we will leave it standing at that. And we are going out to the first one, and this one is not considered a cottage. This is Hammersmith Farm. This farm on Ocean Drive was established in 1640. William Breton received 1,100 acres for survey work in Rhode Island for King Charles I, and it was named for his birthplace in England, Mr. Breton's. The land was confiscated in 1780 because he had sided with the British Crown. And we're going inside, and I will show you, I'll tell you some more about it, but I'll show you these pictures as we go through. Now, these are all taken from either postcards or the brochure about the house, because you're not allowed to photograph inside. This is a foyer, and you might wonder what that presidential seal has, what point that has in here. But this was John Auchincloss's house. He bought 97 acres and he built the main house in 1887. It was 28 rooms, shingle style, and he sold it to his younger brother, Hugh. He had a son who married Janet Lee Bouvier, who had been married and had 2 children, Jacqueline and Lee. And he had 3 children also. And Jacqueline made her debut at the farm in 1948. And she married John F. Kennedy. And that's why you see the presidential seal. That's why you saw it out there in the foyer. We are in the master bedroom now. And that's the bedroom that was used by John Kennedy, the president, and Mrs. Kennedy, Jackie, when they were visiting here. This sort of became the summer White House in 1961 to 63. And in this tiny little private office, this was Mr. Auchincloss's office that he let the president use. And many, well, I shouldn't say many, but a number of very important bills were signed right on that little desk. And there's a little thing that tells you just a little bit about it. As I said, Jackie was married, what made her debut at the farm. This room was used for a lot of that part, and then this was also used in 1953 at the reception, and it sort of overpoured onto the west lawn in addition to that. The Kennedys were married at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Newport. And out from it, that was called the deck room, out from it, right on this grass here, where the receptions overflowed, this is where the helicopter would land when they were bringing President Kennedy here for a little respite from dear old Washington. Here are a couple of views of the garden. Got some nice gardens around there. And I have from the other side a fairly dark view of the house, but because I wanted you to see that side of the house, I included it. It's not too bad. And then if you swing around, you can see the bridge that we came in on. Not too much in that picture, but you see the grass and the Narragansett Bay, and there's the bridge that we came in on into Newport beyond it. This was the first and is the last working farm in Newport. It was a summer White House in 61 to 63. I told you that before. And you get these views of Narragansett Bay without anything between you and it. Now, when we went to the next house, the surf was beating in on the rocks. This was the surf from Hurricane Bonnie of the year that we were there. And now we come to what is known as the cottages. Now, this was the Gilded Age, 1880s and 1890s. And the idea here in the Gilded Age was to outbill, outstaff, outdress, outparty everyone else. It was dazzling wealth, restless ambition and endeavor and rivalry. There was lots of gold everywhere. The houses were used only 6 to 8 weeks a year by the cottages. The word cottages and the word cottage are, of course, within quotes. This is the marble house. This was built in 1889 to 1892 by William Vanderbilt as a birthday present to his wife, Alva. Now, this Vanderbilt was a grandson of Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, who had made the family money in shipping and railroads. In this Gilded Age, the daughter, Consuela, married the 9th Duke of Marlborough at the insistence of her mother. We're still on the outside of it. Again, on any of these houses, no photographs, so my stuff is from postcards and brochures. It depends on what the house was, whether I would put out the money for the brochure on it or whether I just use postcards. But this is the entrance hall. The house is on West Bellevue Avenue, as a number of them are, and its east facing is to the cliffs and to the Atlantic Ocean. It had a staff of 36 and still was used only 6 or 7 weeks a year. Richard Morris Hunt was the designer, as he was on a number of the Newport cottages and a lot of the rich stuff actually on Manhattan down in New York City. We're in the dining room now. And this is called the Gothic room. And then in this kitchen, this kitchen was shown in the movie The Great Gatsby, especially the copper kettles and so forth there. But the property contains a tea house, which was opened in 1914. We'll talk about The Great Gatsby again in a moment, because most of it was photographed at another house. Just the kitchen was used at this one. This is a statue down by the tea house, and that is the open Atlantic that you're looking at there. And here is the tea house. Shortly after Consuela married, Alva divorced William Vanderbilt. In 1932, a year before she died, Alva sold Marble House to Frederick Prince. His money came from railroads. 46 different railroads in his lifetime, and Armour and Company. And this is a view right in front of the house looking over at another little cottage. But we're going to a different one. We're going to the Elms. Now, also on Bellevue Avenue, but with no view of the Atlantic Ocean or of Narragansett Bay. They had to suffer through. This is a copy of a chateau that is very close to Paris, and it was built for Edward J. Berwin. His money came from coal. He bought the Elms in 1888 and then enlarged the grounds, and he commissioned a new house in 1889. And that new house was built in 1891, and its principal stone is limestone. But to the picture here, I have to show you a beech tree because, of course, it was called the Elms, but Dutch elm disease killed all of the elms. So you're looking at a beech, and then we have gone around to the front, and we will enter from the street side of the house. And this is gold allamanda, a nice flower, and a pot right there by the front of the house. And a few details up on the house itself. And then a statue all the way on the top. Now, the house itself is a simple classical plan of fairly balanced proportions. The center is somewhat rounded and is flanked by wings. This is the grand staircase coming down. And this is a conservatory. The balustrade on the 3rd floor conceals the servants' quarters, and the kitchen and laundry are in a deep cellar. This is the dining room. This house that we're looking at, the Elms, was to be demolished in 1962, but the Friends of the Preservation Society of Newport County raised the money to buy it. So you can still see it and go into it today. That's a side front view, and as I told you, I'm into horticulture, so you have to look at flowers. Then these are some of the details over the front of the house. And then a few urns. and then the house from the grounds themselves. Now we're going to move back out to the Atlantic Ocean now, and we're going to a house called Rosecliff. Now this one you might recognize. I have it further on down in my notes, but this was the one involved in the filming of The Great Gatsby with Robert Redford in 1974. But back to the beginning. It was commissioned by Teresa Fair Ulrich, and her money was from the Comstock Silver Lode at Virginia City, Nevada. It was in 1898 with Stanford White as the architect. Now see this, 1898, that's almost the end of the Gilded Age through here. It's modeled after the Grand Trianon, a pavilion at Versailles for Louis XIV. That one was built in 1687 to 91. And the grounds consist of 11 acres, and the view of the Atlantic Ocean is rather unlimited. Now, Mrs. Ulrich died in 1926, while her husband Herman died in 1906. She lived 20 years past him. But the advent of income taxes in 1913 and then World War I had already taken away her whirl of great events and entertainment. I'm still on the outside of the house, so I can still take this picture. No longer did one throw that kind of money at very temporary pleasures. And now I have just 3 pictures to show you on the inside, and the first one is the ballroom. Actually, the first 2 of the ballroom. The ballroom at 40 feet by 80 feet was the largest in Newport, 40 by 80. And the place is the picture of elegance. In fact, it was the scene of much of the filming in 1973 of the Betsy with Sir Laurence Olivier, and then, as I mentioned, the filming of The Great Gatsby in 1974 with Robert Redford. Still the ballroom, huge. And here's the staircase and the entrance hall. Later, the house fell into a sad state. In about 1941, Ray Allen Van Cleef bought it and had all the necessary repairs done. He was headed to Newport for his first stay when he was fatally injured in an automobile accident. So he never got to live in all that he had done. The next owners were Mr. and Mrs. J. Edgar Monroe, who used it for 25 years. Then in 1971, they gave the house, the furnishings, and a trust fund for maintaining it to the Preservation Society of Newport County. Now we're going back inland again, and this is Chateau-sur-Mer. This is an oldie. This was built in 1852 for William S. Wetmore. His fortune was in the China trade. Now here's a rather dark view of the house, but you get the idea. It's like an old Victorian thing. Victorian architecture with 1872 restorations by Hunt again. Modifications were made in about 1871 by Hunt, who had a hand in so many Newport, New York City mansions, as I mentioned before. This is in the ballroom part of it. Mr. Wetmore died in 1862, and at 16 years of age, his son, George Peabody, took over. At only 16 years. This is the dining room for a Victorian Christmas. And George Peabody went on to finish law school. He was married and then traveled with his bride before coming back to settle in the redone house. This is called the Hunt staircase, and those windows are called McPherson windows. And then I have the bedroom here. Following his return from Europe in 1880, George Peabody served 2 terms as governor of Rhode Island and 3 terms as U.S. Senator from Rhode Island. He served on the planning board for the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And then in the 1930s, the Wetmore daughters covered much of that beautiful woodworking that we have been seeing with paint. This included the ceilings. In 1969, the Preservation Society bought the chateau, and the rooms were restored to their elegance of the 1870s. When it was first built, the house had a view of the Atlantic Ocean, but today that view is gone. So one last picture of the outside of the house, and then we're going to the big one, the breakers. That's it. This is from a postcard here, and this is that walk that you can go around the cliffs, and this is the breakers right here. This is the most visited cottage in Newport. Millions of people have passed through it since the Preservation Society purchased it in 1973. Cornelius Vanderbilt II used the original house that he bought with the property until a fire destroyed it in 1892. Now this children's cottage did not get destroyed, so that is the original. That goes all the way back. And then here's the entrance, one of the entrance gates to it. The present breakers was commissioned in 1893 using Richard Morris Hunt again. Who else? And here's a hibiscus on the grounds. The 70-room cottage was built in 1895. It is steel reinforced and contains a lot of Indiana limestone. Protection from fire was a continuing theme during the planning and the building. And then I didn't mention that it was 12 acres of property right here on the Atlantic. That children's cottage was designed by the original house architect, Peabody and Stearns of Boston. But let me move you on. This ceiling detail here that I show you is actually not even in the house. It's on one of the verandas. Otherwise, I would not have been able to take the picture. And I'm going to take you inside for 3 pictures, I think. Whoops, we're going to look at the garden first, a little bit of the garden. Now, while the money came from from Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, Cornelius II was not a chip off the old grandfather. This is the great hall here. He was gentle, fair, and pious. He met his wife while they were teaching Sunday school. But he did serve as chairman of the New York Central Railroad with property worth nearly $200 million, even back then. And he was a director for 49 other railroads. And we're going into Mrs. Vanderbilt's bedroom here. The Breakers has an unlimited view of the Atlantic Ocean. It really is a sort of a special place. And that's the house, and here is that view out towards the Atlantic. And then I saw these towards the back of the house. These are cones of a true cedar. You don't see too many of those these days. And then the ocean side of the house here, as we're leaving the Breakers, and with the bringing in of this lighthouse picture, we're actually leaving Newport. Now we're still in the elegant East, and at Westchester Broadway Theater at Elmsford, New York, we were staying at White Plains. We went to a dinner theater, and they were showing Funny Girl, the story of Fanny Brice and her 24 years with the Ziegfeld Follies. The composer was Jules Steins, and the lyricist was Bob Merrill, and these people did a magnificent job of it. Of course, you're not allowed photography within a theater, so I just used the program there. And our last stop before we headed back home was at the New York Botanical Gardens. These were founded in 1891. They're 250 acres right in Manhattan, with 28 specialty. No, I'm sorry, it's not in Manhattan. It's in New York City, but it's not on Manhattan. It's 250 acres with 28 specialty gardens such as herbs and perennials. 40 acres original forest. And it has the Enid Hop Conservatory, and a tram is used to take you through a lot of this part of it, because you would run out of time if you had to walk all of it. But we walk quite a bit because we like to walk in gardens and all of that type of thing. Trimmed hedges. If you've never seen passion flower, that's a pretty good picture of it there. The top of the conservatory. All of this is right in New York City. You wouldn't believe they had so many trees. And this is a plant you will find growing wild in Hawaii. That's called lobster claw flower. And then on these branches and all, you can see some air plants. And here's a water garden with the conservatory in the background. Now I want to show you a couple of things here. Well, I'll show you some water lilies first. They always make a real neat picture. And then I want to show you what a lotus blossom looks like. I'm really interested in the lotus because lotus seed, now I found one right in, not that particular plant, but here's one I found very close by, and these are the pods that carry the lotus seeds. These are the pods. Now this one actually still has a few seeds left in it. Lotus seeds have been found in Egyptian tombs centuries old, and they were still viable. They would still sprout. And then here's a much more formal area. And the Watson building is the educational place. They also have a gift shop and so forth. And this is one of the tram stops, so you can get to here very easily. Now, I was wondering how to end this, and when I first put this show together, I ended it with a last look at New York City with lots of traffic. And I decided I probably didn't want to end it quite that way, so I changed my mind. And I show you New York City at night from over on the New Jersey side at New Jersey Liberty State Park. Thank you.